Marcus Johnson stood at the edge of town, his rental car idling behind him. 15 years had passed since he last set foot in Millfield. The welcome sign looked the same, faded blue letters against peeling white paint. Nothing much changed in this small southern town. He sighed and got back in his car, at 42, with graying temples and reading glasses he now needed for small print. Marcus never planned to return. His life in Chicago as a history professor had been everything he wanted: respect, intellectual challenge, and most importantly, distance from his past. The call about his mother's stroke changed everything. Marcus drove slowly down Main Street. The same stores lined both sides: Tucker's Hardware, Millfield Diner, First Baptist Church. Only now, a few empty storefronts dotted the once busy street. He noticed the old people still sat on benches outside the courthouse, and children still played in the park by the river. But some things never changed. He saw how white folks still gathered on the north side of town, while black families lived mostly on the south side. The invisible line running through Millfield remained as strong as ever. Marcus pulled into the driveway of his childhood home. The small blue house looked smaller than he remembered. The porch sagged a bit, and the flower beds his mother once kept perfect were now overgrown. "Marcus, is that you?" Mrs. Taylor called from next door. The elderly woman hobbled to the fence between their yards. "Lord have mercy, look at you. A doctor now." "It's good to see you, Mrs. Taylor," Marcus said, giving her a gentle hug. "And yes, a doctor, but not the medical kind. Just a PhD in history. Your mama is so proud. She tells everyone about her professor's son." Mrs. Taylor's face grew serious. "She's doing better. That therapy is helping her speak again." Inside the house, Marcus found his mother sitting in her favorite chair by the window. Yvonne Johnson's face lit up when she saw him, though her smile now pulled to one side. She reached for him with her good arm. "Mama," he whispered, kneeling beside her chair. "I'm home now." The next few days passed in a blur of doctor appointments and settling in. Marcus arranged for a part-time nurse and organized his mother's medications. He cleaned the house and fixed the leaky kitchen faucet, but soon the question of money became urgent. His leave from the university was unpaid, and his savings wouldn't last forever. That's when Principal Roberts called. "We need a history teacher at Millfield High," he explained when Marcus met him in his office. "Mrs. Peterson retired last month, and we haven't found a replacement. It would just be temporary, until the end of the school year." Marcus looked around the principal's office. The same wood paneling covered the walls. The same trophy case stood in the corner, displaying the same dusty football trophies from the 1980s. "I don't know," Marcus hesitated. "Teaching high school wasn't exactly my plan." "We can't pay university wages," Principal Roberts admitted. "But your mother needs you here, and we need a qualified teacher. Seems like a good match to me." Marcus thought about his quiet university office, his research, his apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. Then he thought about his mother's medical bills. "When do I start?" he asked finally. The following Monday, Marcus stood before his first class at Millfield High School. 30 teenagers stared back at him with expressions ranging from boredom to curiosity. "My name is Dr. Johnson," he began, writing it on the whiteboard. "I'll be your U.S. history teacher for the remainder of the year." A hand shot up in the back row. "Are you related to Miss Yvonne who had the stroke?" asked a girl with bright beaded braids. "Yes," Marcus nodded. "She's my mother." "My grandma says she was the best kindergarten teacher this town ever had," the girl said proudly. For the first time since returning to Millfield, Marcus felt a small spark of connection to this place he tried so hard to forget. 3 weeks into teaching at Millfield High, Marcus still felt like a visitor. The teachers' lounge conversations about local gossip left him silent. He ate lunch alone most days, grading papers or preparing lessons. One afternoon, while looking for extra textbooks, Marcus ventured into the school's storage room. The small space at the end of the history wing hadn't been properly organized in years. Dust covered everything. "Should be back here somewhere," he muttered, pushing aside stacks of outdated textbooks. In the far corner, behind a broken desk, Marcus noticed several cardboard boxes. They looked older than everything else in the room. Curious, he pulled one forward and lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, dozens of black and white images from what appeared to be the 1920s and 30s. Marcus carefully lifted one. It showed a busy street lined with businesses. Well-dressed black men and women walked along sidewalks or stood proudly in front of shops. The storefronts read Walker's Pharmacy, Johnson Brothers Tailoring, and West Side Bank and Trust. Marcus frowned. He didn't recognize this street in Millfield. He dug deeper into the box and found more photos. A 3-story brick building with Carter Hotel on its awning. A crowded theater called The Jewel. A bustling restaurant with a sign reading May's Fine Dining. All showed black-owned businesses and black customers. This can't be Millfield, Marcus whispered to himself. Then he found an envelope containing newspaper clippings. The yellowed paper crumbled at the edges, but the headlines were clear. West Side Business District celebrates 5 new openings, and Black-owned bank provides 20 new home loans. Each article mentioned Millfield by name. Marcus checked his watch. His next class would start in 10 minutes. Quickly, he gathered the materials and carried them to his classroom. That evening, after visiting his mother, Marcus spread the contents of the box across his childhood bedroom floor. Besides photographs and newspaper clippings, he found letters, business records, and even a detailed map labeled West Side District, Millfield, 1932. The map showed a 16-block area filled with businesses, a school, a library, and a small hospital, all apparently owned and operated by black residents. According to the documents, this had been one of the most successful black business districts in the entire South. Yet Marcus had never heard of it. Not from his mother, not from his teachers, not from anyone in town. It was as if this entire neighborhood had been erased from history. The next day, Marcus approached Mrs. Washington, the school librarian who had worked at Millfield High for over 30 years. "Do you know anything about a black business district that used to be here? They called it West Side?" Marcus asked, showing her one of the photographs. Mrs. Washington's smile disappeared. She glanced around to see if anyone was listening. "Where did you find those?" she asked quietly. "In the storage room. There are boxes of materials back there." Mrs. Washington closed the library office door. "Those boxes were supposed to be thrown out years ago. Principal Harmon ordered it back in the 90s, but I guess someone just hid them instead." "But why? This is important history," Marcus said. "Some histories around here aren't meant to be remembered," she replied. "At least according to certain people in this town." She pointed to the photograph. "That's Jefferson Street, though they renamed it after everything happened." "After what happened?" Marcus asked. Mrs. Washington shook her head. "I've already said too much. You should be careful asking questions about this, Dr. Johnson, especially since you're new." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the photographs, about the thriving community they showed, and its mysterious disappearance from both the town and its history. The next morning, he decided to include a photograph in his lesson about the Great Depression. He wanted to see if any students recognized the location or had heard stories from grandparents. "Does anyone know what part of town this is?" he asked, holding up the image of Jefferson Street. The classroom fell silent. One student in the back raised his hand. "My grandpa said there used to be black businesses somewhere around here, but they'd all disappeared a long time ago. Nobody talks about it." Marcus nodded slowly. "Well, maybe it's time we started." The next Monday morning, Principal Roberts called Marcus to his office. The principal's normally friendly face looked tense as Marcus took a seat across from him. "I understand you're using some unusual materials in your history class," Principal Roberts said, tapping his fingers on the desk. Marcus sat up straighter. "You mean the local historical documents I found in storage? They show a thriving black business district that existed here in Millfield." "Dr. Johnson," the principal sighed, "we have an approved curriculum and textbooks. The school board expects us to follow them." "These materials don't contradict the curriculum," Marcus argued. "They enhance it by making history relevant to our students. It's their town's actual history." Principal Roberts frowned. "I've received calls from 3 parents already. They're concerned you're, how did they put it? Stirring up trouble. One even mentioned the word political." "Teaching factual history isn't political," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice calm. "These businesses existed. This community existed. How is showing students photographs political?" "In Millfield, some parts of history are sensitive," the principal replied. "I'm asking you to stick to the textbook. That's all. As Marcus left the office, he noticed the school secretary watching him with a strange expression. In the hallway, two teachers stopped talking when he walked by. By lunchtime, it felt like the whole school was whispering about him. In the cafeteria, Marcus sat alone until Emma Rivera, the art teacher, joined him. With her bright scarves and paint-splattered jeans, Emma stood out among the conservative faculty. "So you found the West Side boxes," she said without introduction. "I've been wondering if anyone would ever discover them." Marcus looked up in surprise. "You know about them?" Emma nodded. "My grandmother has lived here her entire life. She told me stories about West Side when I was growing up." She leaned closer. "The official town history is incomplete, to put it nicely." "Why would they hide this?" Marcus asked. It was clearly a point of pride for the community. "That's the question, isn't it?" Emma replied. "If you're really interested, you should talk to my grandmother. She remembers everything." After school, Marcus headed to the town library to research more about Millfield's past. He asked the librarian for local history books or archives. "We have one published history of Millfield," she said, retrieving a thin volume from behind the desk, "and some old newspapers on microfilm." The book, titled Millfield, A Southern Heritage, contained no mention of any black business district. The chapter covering the 1920s and 30s focused entirely on the white-owned downtown area and cotton production. It was as if black residents barely existed in the town's history. As Marcus used the microfilm machine to check old newspapers, he noticed an elderly man watching him from across the room. When their eyes met, the man quickly looked away. Later, as Marcus was leaving, the same man approached him in the parking lot. "You're Yvonne Johnson's boy, aren't you?" the man asked. "The one teaching at the high school?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "Marcus Johnson." "I'm Harold Thomas. I worked at the courthouse for 40 years. The old man glanced around nervously. "Heard you've been asking about West Side." "I found some photographs at the school," Marcus explained. "I'm just trying to understand what happened to all those businesses." Harold's face darkened. "Some things in this town got buried deep, son. Some powerful folks want them to stay buried." He started to walk away, then turned back. "Check the property records from 1937. That's all I'm saying." That evening, 3 parents called Marcus at home. Each conversation followed the same pattern: concerns about controversial material, suggestions to focus on regular history, and thinly veiled warnings about his temporary position. After the third call, Marcus sat by his mother's bedside. She was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the tension building around her son. "What am I getting into, Mama?" he whispered. Marcus looked at the stack of photographs on the nightstand. One showed a proud black man standing in front of Walker's Pharmacy with his family. Their faces seemed to ask him a question. "Will you tell our story, or let it be buried again?" His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "My grandmother wants to meet you. Tomorrow after school?" Marcus replied with one word: "Yes." Emma's grandmother lived in a small yellow house on Cedar Street. At 87, Beatrice Rivera moved slowly, but her mind remained sharp. Her living room walls displayed family photos spanning generations alongside colorful paintings that Emma had clearly created. "So you're the teacher causing all the fuss," Beatrice said as she poured tea. Her eyes, bright and knowing, studied Marcus. "About time someone did." "I'm just looking for the truth, Mrs. Rivera," Marcus replied. "Miss Beatrice will do," she corrected. "And truth's been hiding in plain sight for decades around here." Marcus showed her the photographs he'd found. Beatrice handled them with care, her fingers trembling slightly. "Lord, I remember this place," she whispered, pointing to a beauty salon. "My mama got her hair done here every Saturday, and this restaurant. They made the best sweet potato pie in 3 counties." As the afternoon sun shifted through lace curtains, Beatrice told Marcus about West Side. The district had started after World War I when returning black soldiers and growing cotton prices created new opportunities. By 1930, 16 blocks of black-owned businesses thrived, serving not just Millfield's black community, but customers from surrounding counties too. "We had our own bank, our own doctors, our own everything," Beatrice explained. "White folks downtown didn't like that much. Black people with nice cars and fine clothes, not needing their permission or their business." "But what happened to it all?" Marcus asked. Beatrice's face darkened. She set down her teacup. July 16, 1937, she said quietly. I was just a child, not even 10 years old. My daddy woke me up in the middle of the night. I remember the orange glow outside my window. She paused. West Side was burning. Marcus leaned forward. A fire. Fires, Beatrice corrected. Started in different places all at once. Too many to fight. By morning, most of West Side was gone. An accident? Marcus asked, though he already suspected the answer. They called it that in the newspaper. Beatrice replied bitterly. But everyone knew. A group of white men, businessmen, police, even some government folks, they planned it all. Burned out the competition. The next day, Marcus visited the county courthouse. Harold Thomas, the man from the library, worked as a janitor there despite his age. When no one was looking, Harold led Marcus to the records room in the basement. Property deeds are in those cabinets, Harold whispered. I'll keep watch upstairs. For hours, Marcus searched through dusty files, tracking ownership of land in what had been West Side. The pattern was unmistakable. Within weeks after the fire, all the burned properties had been purchased for pennies on the dollar by 3 companies: Millfield Development Corporation, Southern Investment Trust, and Heritage Properties. Further research revealed these companies were owned by just 7 men, including the mayor at that time, the police chief, and the fathers of several families who still controlled Millfield today. One name made Marcus stop cold: Roberts. The grandfather of Principal Roberts was listed as a director of Millfield Development Corporation. Another document, hidden inside a property deed folder, confirmed his worst suspicions: a handwritten plan for clearing the undesirable businesses from Jefferson Street, signed by all 7 men. As Marcus photographed the evidence with his phone, he heard footsteps on the stairs. He quickly returned the files and pretended to study a public record book as the county clerk appeared. We're closing in 10 minutes, she said suspiciously. What exactly are you researching? Just family history, Marcus lied. That night, Marcus laid out everything he'd learned on his dining room table. The photographs, his notes from Beatrice, copies of property records, and a map showing how West Side land was now used. Mostly warehouses, a trucking company, and empty lots, all still owned by descendants of the same 7 families. His phone rang. It was Principal Roberts. Dr. Johnson, I need to see you in my office before classes tomorrow, he said coldly. The school board has concerns about your research activities. After hanging up, Marcus noticed a car driving slowly past his house. It circled the block twice before parking down the street. Someone was watching him. The following morning, Marcus arrived early for his meeting with Principal Roberts. He found the principal already in his office with 2 school board members. Their faces were serious as they motioned for Marcus to sit down. Dr. Johnson, Principal Roberts began, we understand you've been visiting elderly residents, asking questions about events from the distant past. You've also been seen examining restricted county records. I'm a historian, Marcus replied calmly. Research is what I do. The older board member, Mr. Phillips, leaned forward. This isn't Chicago, Dr. Johnson. Small towns like Millfield function because people know when to leave sleeping dogs lie. Is that a threat? Marcus asked. A friendly warning, the second board member said. Your contract is temporary. We hate to see it end prematurely. After the tense meeting, Marcus walked to his classroom, noticing whispers following him through the hallway. He wondered if he should back down. His mother needed him here, needed the health insurance his job provided. During his planning period, Marcus was surprised when Mrs. Washington, the librarian, slipped into his classroom and closed the door. I don't have much time, she said quietly. But you need to know you're not alone. What do you mean? Marcus asked. There are people in Millfield who kept the real history alive. People who want the truth told. She handed him a folded note. This address. Go there tonight at 8. Knock 3 times, pause, then twice more. Before Marcus could ask more questions, Mrs. Washington left as quickly as she had come. That evening, Marcus found himself standing before an old house on the edge of town. Following the instructions, he knocked as directed. The door opened just enough for him to slip inside. The living room contained 6 people of various ages, both black and white. Marcus recognized Harold Thomas from the courthouse. Emma Rivera stood by the window, keeping watch. "Welcome to what we call the Memory Keepers," said an elegant white-haired woman who introduced herself as Sarah Humphrey. "My family has lived in Millfield for 5 generations. My grandfather opposed what happened to Westside. He kept records." Around the room, others introduced themselves. James Wheeler, who had access to sealed courthouse files. Reverend Davis from the AME Church, whose basement hid salvaged documents. Mary Lewis, a retired teacher who had collected oral histories. And Ben Carter, whose grandfather owned the hotel in Westside. "We've been waiting for someone with the courage and position to help us tell this story properly," Sarah explained. "When you started asking questions, we decided to reach out." From hidden locations around the room, behind paintings, under floorboards, inside hollowed books, they brought out their treasures. Deeds to Westside properties, photographs of the night of the fire, business records, personal diaries, letters of protest written after the destruction. "My grandfather took these the morning after," Ben said, showing Marcus photographs of men in suits and police uniforms watching buildings burn. Their faces were clearly visible and recognizable as the grandfathers and great-grandfathers of Millfield's current leadership. "Most stunning is this," James said, producing an official-looking document. "The insurance companies investigated the fire and ruled it arson. The report was sealed by court order, but my father made a copy before it disappeared." "Why bring this out now?" Marcus asked. "Why not years ago?" "People tried," Reverend Davis explained. "In the 60s, in the 80s. Each time, they were silenced, jobs lost, homes vandalized, families threatened. But times have changed. The old power structure is weaker now." Sarah nodded. "The town needs healing, and healing requires truth. The descendants of those who lost everything deserve recognition, at minimum." "What exactly do you want me to do?" Marcus asked. "Teach the truth," Mary said simply. "Use your position. We'll support you with evidence." "It won't be easy," Harold warned. "The same families still hold power here." "I've already been warned to stop," Marcus admitted. Emma spoke for the first time. "My grandmother says there's a difference between being quiet and being silenced. For too long, Millfield has silenced its past." Marcus looked around the room at these people who had risked so much to preserve history. He thought about his students, learning a sanitized version of their town's story. "I'll need all your evidence," he said finally, "and I'll need your help." As he left that night, Sarah pressed a key into his hand. "To my family's lake house. If things get dangerous, you'll find safety there. We protect our own." The next Monday, Marcus changed his lesson plan. Instead of the textbook chapter on the Great Depression, he projected a large photograph of Westside onto the classroom wall. "Today, we're going to learn about local history," he announced. "History that happened right here, on streets you walk every day." His students, usually half asleep during morning classes, sat up straight. As Marcus showed more photographs and explained what Westside had been, the classroom grew unusually quiet. When he described the night of the fire in 1937, several students gasped. "Are you saying someone burned down a whole neighborhood on purpose?" asked Darius Washington, a student who rarely participated in class discussions. "The evidence suggests it wasn't an accident," Marcus replied carefully. "Why isn't this in our textbook?" asked another student. "That's a very good question," Marcus said. For homework, he assigned each student to interview an older family member about Westside. "Ask if they remember stories about Jefferson Street before it was renamed," he instructed. The next day, Darius arrived early to class, his eyes wide with excitement and anger. "Dr. Johnson, my great-granddaddy owned a shoe store in Westside," he said, pulling out old family photos. "My grandma told me everything last night. She even has the original deed to the property." Other students arrived with similar stories. Though many families had never spoken openly about Westside, the memories remained. One girl's grandmother had worked at the beauty salon. A boy's great-uncle had played saxophone at the Jewel Theater. As word spread about Marcus's lessons, Principal Roberts called him in again. "This stops now," the principal demanded. "I've received calls from the superintendent and mayor. You're to return to the approved curriculum immediately." Marcus left the office knowing his job was in jeopardy, but something had changed in his students. They were hungry for the truth. When he entered his classroom the next morning, Marcus found a note on his desk instructing him to report to a disciplinary hearing after school. He was about to announce a return to the textbook when Darius stood up. "Dr. Johnson, we know they're trying to shut you down," Darius said. "But we want to learn real history, our history." Another student, Lisa Chen, joined in. "My parents came here from Taiwan 10 years ago. They say people need to know their true past or they can't build a good future." Before Marcus could respond, the classroom door opened. Principal Roberts stood there with the superintendent. "Dr. Johnson, please step outside," the principal ordered. "No, sir," Darius said, standing taller. "We're in the middle of an important lesson." Other students stood too. "We want to learn about Westside," they said together. The superintendent entered the room, his face red with anger. "This class will return to approved materials immediately, or there will be consequences." That's when Darius pulled out his phone. "Already streaming live, sir. 300 people watching right now." He turned the phone to show the live stream on the school's student news account. "We're just asking to learn our town's real history." The superintendent sputtered, then retreated with Principal Roberts. But the damage was done. By lunchtime, the video had thousands of views. Parents were calling the school. Local news had picked up the story. After school, instead of a private disciplinary hearing, Marcus found himself in the auditorium facing the entire school board, dozens of parents, and a reporter from the regional newspaper. "Dr. Johnson is accused of teaching unauthorized curriculum and creating disruption," the board president announced. But before Marcus could defend himself, the doors burst open. At least 30 students entered, led by Darius. They carried enlarged photographs of Westside, family artifacts, and handmade signs reading, "TACH the truth." "We have something to say first," Darius announced confidently. Behind them came more people, members of the Memory Keepers, elderly residents including Beatrice Rivera in her wheelchair, and parents who had heard their children's sudden interest in local history. "My great-grandfather built something important in this town," Darius said clearly into the microphone. "I have a right to know what happened to it." As camera flashes illuminated the room, Marcus realized his students had just taught the most powerful lesson of all. The town hall meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, but by 5, the parking lot was already full. People stood in groups outside, talking in low voices. Police officers directed traffic as cars lined both sides of Main Street. Inside, every seat was taken. People stood against the walls and crowded the back of the room. Mayor William Hargrove sat at the center of a long table with the town council members on either side. Their faces looked grim. Marcus sat in the front row beside Emma Rivera and Darius Washington. The school board had suspended him pending investigation, but tonight wasn't about his job. It was about Millfield's past. At exactly 7, Mayor Hargrove called the meeting to order. Due to recent discussions about historical events in our community, this special meeting will address questions about an area once known as Westside, he announced, his voice stiff. The mayor nodded to the town attorney, who stood with a prepared statement. After reviewing available records, the town acknowledges that a business district serving the black community existed until 1937, when it was destroyed by fire. Beyond this, records are incomplete. "That's a lie." The sharp voice came from the back of the room. Heads turned to see Beatrice Rivera being wheeled forward by her granddaughter. "I watched Westside burn. There was nothing incomplete about it." The crowd murmured as Beatrice continued. "I was just a child, but I remember Sheriff Davis and his deputies blocking the fire trucks. I remember Mr. Hargrove's grandfather standing there watching it burn." "These are serious accusations without evidence," the mayor protested. That's when Sarah Humphrey stood up. Tall and elegant in her expensive suit, the town's wealthiest resident commanded immediate attention. "I have evidence," she said clearly. She nodded to James Wheeler, who wheeled in a cart of documents. "My grandfather, Thomas Humphrey, opposed what happened that night. He kept records, including this." She held up a leather-bound journal. "This contains names, dates, and details of the meetings where the destruction of Westside was planned. Those responsible included the mayor, police chief, and several businessmen, the grandfathers and great-grandfathers of people in this room." The silence was heavy as Sarah read entries describing how the men planned to take over the valuable land after forcing out its owners. When she finished, An elderly man stood up slowly. "My name is Robert Johnson. My father owned Johnson Brothers Tailoring." His voice trembled. "We lost everything that night. My father never recovered. He died believing no one would ever know the truth." One by one, others stood to share their stories. Children and grandchildren of West Side business owners. Elderly residents who remembered the thriving district and its violent end. Even a few descendants of those responsible who expressed shame at their families' actions. Marcus watched as the past unfolded through living memory. This wasn't dry history from textbooks. It was real people describing how their lives had been shaped by deliberate destruction and stolen opportunity. Mayor Hargrove tried several times to end the meeting, but the crowd wouldn't let him. When he suggested further study was needed, the room erupted in angry shouts. Finally, Darius Washington approached the microphone. Despite being only 17, he spoke with the confidence of someone much older. "My great-grandfather owned Washington Shoe Emporium on Jefferson Street," he said. "The land where his store stood is now owned by Millfield Properties, which is owned by the mayor's family. That land was taken illegally. Every building in West Side has a similar story." He held up a map. "We've traced every property. We know who owned them then and who owns them now. We know how they were taken." The mayor's face turned pale. "This meeting is adjourned," he announced, standing to leave. "You can leave, Mayor Hargrove, but this conversation isn't over," called out Reverend Davis. "This town needs healing, and healing starts with truth." As the official meeting broke up, people gathered in groups, looking at photographs and documents. Black and white residents who had barely spoken to each other were deep in conversation. A local TV news crew interviewed Beatrice while Marcus saw the reporter from the regional newspaper talking to Darius. Outside in the warm evening air, Marcus stood watching the crowd spill out onto the lawn of Town Hall. Emma joined him. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus looked at the people of Millfield, divided for so long by secrets and silence, finally talking to each other about their shared past. "Now the real work begins," he said. 6 months passed. Winter gave way to spring, bringing fresh green leaves to the oak trees along Main Street and colorful flowers to the beds around the town square. But the changes in Millfield went much deeper than the seasons. Marcus Johnson stood on the empty lot where Walker's Pharmacy once stood, watching volunteers set up chairs for today's ceremony. A large object covered by a blue tarp waited to be unveiled. Nearby, a construction crew worked on the foundation of a new building. "Hard to believe how much has changed," said Darius, now a high school senior, as he helped arrange the last row of chairs. Marcus nodded. After the town hall meeting, Millfield had divided sharply. Some residents, mostly those connected to the families involved in West Side's destruction, wanted to move on without dwelling on the past. Others demanded acknowledgement, apologies, and even reparations. The tension had climbed for weeks until a surprising announcement. Mayor Hargrove had resigned. In a written statement, he acknowledged his family's role in the events of 1937 and transferred ownership of several properties back to the descendants of their original West Side owners. Other families followed his example, though some still refused. The town council, with 3 new members elected in a special vote, created the West Side Historical Commission to document the full story and establish appropriate memorials. Today marked the first official recognition. "Dr. Johnson," Mrs. Washington called, waving from the street. "The students are here." A school bus pulled up, and Marcus's history students poured out. Each carried a notebook. They weren't just here to observe but to document this moment for the living history project they had created. By noon, nearly half the town had gathered. Chairs quickly filled, and people stood in groups behind them. Marcus spotted his mother in her wheelchair in the front row, her health much improved. Beside her sat Beatrice Rivera, the 2 elderly women now close friends. At precisely 12, Reverend Davis stepped to the microphone. "Today, we begin to heal an old wound," he announced. "Not by forgetting our past, but by facing it honestly." The new mayor, Teresa Collins, spoke next. A lifelong Millfield resident whose family had no connection to the events of 1937, she had won a special election with support from both black and white voters. "This memorial is just the beginning," Mayor Collins said, gesturing to the covered object. "The new West Side Cultural Center will open next year on this spot, housing a museum, community spaces, and small business incubators to help new entrepreneurs, especially those from families who lost their livelihoods here generations ago. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he felt surprisingly calm. 6 months ago, he had feared losing his job. Now, he was the newly appointed director of the West Side Historical Project and a permanent teacher at Millfield High. History isn't just what happened, Marcus told the crowd. It's what we choose to remember, what we choose to forget, and what we do with that knowledge. He looked out at the faces before him, his students, the memory keepers, town residents both black and white. Millfield chose to forget a painful chapter of its past. Now we choose to remember, not to divide us further, but to understand how we got here and where we might go together. At his signal, Darius and Sarah Humphrey pulled away the blue tarp, revealing a black granite monument. On its front, etched in gold, were the words, West Side Business District, 1918 to 1937, destroyed by hate, remembered with honor. Below this was a complete list of the businesses lost and their owners' names. The back of the monument showed a map of West Side in its prime, ensuring no one could ever again claim it didn't exist. After the ceremony, people lingered, studying the monument and sharing stories. Some cried. Others sought out descendants of West Side families to offer personal apologies. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, but it was a beginning. As the crowd thinned, Marcus found himself standing with Darius by the monument. I got accepted to Howard University, Darius announced. Going to study history, like you. Marcus smiled. The world needs more historians who understand why truth matters. They looked across the empty lots that had once been West Side. Soon, new buildings would rise here, different from the originals, but honoring their legacy. Will you stay in Millfield? Darius asked. Marcus thought about the question. 15 years ago, he had fled this town, certain he would never return. Now he looked around at the community that was, imperfectly but genuinely, trying to transform itself. Yes, he said finally, my work here isn't finished yet.